Today we're taking a tour of the character creation system from the Sentinel Comics RPG. If you're brand new to the game, check out my recent tour of the character sheet, which touches on the important stuff for character creation. Today's video will make a bit more sense if you do. And the character creation system has two methods for character creation. We have the constructed method, where you go through the 8 steps that'll determine things like your character's background, your power source, personality, make your choices from the list of mechanical stuff within each step, and move on to the next step. Or there's the randomly generated guided method, where you instead roll on the list of mechanical stuff in each step, but it gives you more options and flexibility than any other random character generation system I've ever seen. Maybe a bit too much. But if I sat down to play a campaign only to find out the guided method was absolutely mandatory, I wouldn't leave immediately, which, trust me, saying a lot. So, at the end of each new step, you'll be given a particular number of particular types of polyhedral dice that you need to remember even if you're using the constructed method, because your powers and qualities are ranked with a particular die type from D6 to D12, and you'll occasionally be asked to assign these dice to your powers and qualities as you choose them. For example, at the end of the background step, you get some dice to assign to powers during the next step, power source, and the retired background you have gives you a D12 and 2 D6s. So, you get 3 powers from the list in your power source, one at max level of D12, the other 2 at lowest level of D6. Page 115 has a list of the power descriptions, and 119 is a list of the qualities if you want a bit more info about them. But as I said before, it's really just like a general descriptive sentence, very abstract. Whatever you and the GM decide it's capable of, that's what it's capable of. Now, if you're using the guided method, you'll of course also use the dice from the previous step to roll with on the chart of your current step, but instead of adding the results together for one random result on the chart, like in most games with these kind of random generation systems, you get to use each individual die result as well as the sum of any 2 die results. So, if you roll and get a 3, 6, and 7, you consult the chart and pick from options 3, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 13. And that's where a big chunk of the flexibility I mentioned comes from. If that wasn't enough, which I think it absolutely is, you get one reroll for each step of character creation where you do this roll thing. As far as I'm concerned, at that point you might as well just use the constructed method, but whatever. Now let's go over the steps themselves. Step number 1 is background. It's what you were before you were a hero, or your current stint as a hero, I should say, because, as I mentioned before, you could be a former hero returning from retirement. You also could be from a long line of heroes, maybe a former criminal, maybe you were created like a robot or some sort of magical golem or something, or you could be from another planet. Also, some of these can relate to day jobs that your character currently has, such as, academic or performer. Worst case scenario, if you can't really find an appropriate background or decide on one, you got unremarkable or blank slate. The first one is pretty generic, and the second one is amnesia ridden, so you can make the GM make up your backstory for you, because they don't shoulder enough of the burden for fun. Each background gives you some dice to assign to a list of qualities you get to choose, and you get a principle to help reflect and bring to life your backstory. You also get some dice to assign to the powers list found in step 2. Step 2 is your power source, or origin of your powers. Many of them kind of overlap with each other, which will feel less restrictive in putting a concept together. Like if I had my heart set on playing a supernatural hero, odds are good that the mystical, relic, supernatural, cursed shouldn't be too outside what I want from a lore perspective. And once I have those, now I'm just deciding on mechanical stuff. Of course, if you rolled randomly, you might not get any of those, but you could always re-roll. You're bound to get at least 1 or 2 of those, right? Maybe? Not necessarily. Randomly rolling characters is dumb. Anyway, it doesn't matter that much because there's also like a supernatural background, but you could forgo the supernatural background or a supernatural feeling power source in order to get the other one, right? Like these conceptual pieces are spread out throughout the character creation process, so if you want to play like a tech person or robot person or something, like you can just pick one from one of the stages. It's way easier though if you don't roll randomly. What was my point? Rolling randomly is dumb? No, flexibility. You have some flexibility within the randomly rolling. That's my point. You get a list of powers you assign your dice to, and also gain some abilities, at least 2 yellow, and usually 1 green. though a few power sources trade that green for something else. And because of your powers and abilities, the power source is the second most impactful decision affecting your character's gameplay. The first being the next step, Step 3. And Step 3 is your archetype. It's the general type of super character that you are. Speedster, Blaster, Psychic, Shadow, Physical Powerhouse. They all bring to mind classic Supers characters that you most likely want to emulate. You get a specific power or quality to help bring that power concept to life. It's kind of hard to be a speedster without the speed power, for example. We also get a bonus power and maybe a quality or even two depending on your situation. That's at least typically how it pans out. There's always some exceptions, of course, with every set of options from each step. There's always a few weird ones, but the star of the show with your archetype is your set of abilities. For one, these abilities really help sell the idea of your concept. It's hard to be a convincing multiple man if you don't have the Minion Maker archetype, because you can actually summon fully functioning minions on a regular basis, though it's not impossible. I did kind of do it in another video, probably later on, check that out. But point is, the abilities themselves really stand out with a lot of flavor and theme, really bringing that concept to life mechanically, like a concrete kind of way. But also, there's a big emphasis on green abilities in your archetype in general, and green abilities can be used all the time regardless of your status. They form the backbone of your character's playstyle. It's not easy to be the big enemy debuffer of your group if all your hinder-based abilities are locked in the yellow status. Also, the archetype gives us a principle, which of course nets us yet another green ability, plus the whole values, personality, backstory stuff that can come with a principle. Anyway, step 4. Personality. Easily one of my favorite parts of the entire game because it determines your status die for each of the 3 colored statuses, which, if you remember, is how your character handles and responds to danger over time. There's just so much character to be found in those 3 dice alone. For example, the lone wolf background cannot afford to have bad moments, right? They're always on their own. They need to be at the top of their game so their dice are consistent. Now, naive people, one of my favorites, they're too slow to realize just how big a trouble they're in, so their status is really low until the last possible second and just spikes really high later on. I love stuff like that. And you can even find dice patterns, like the same exact pattern, same exact dice, same exact order, but it has a different feel to it because of the flavor text and other stuff. It feels like a different personality, but it really brings that personality to life. Either way, it's great. Favorite part of the game, best part of the game. Love it. You also get to make up a unique quality for your character that relates to your backstory, which is not as easy as it sounds, but still an awesome idea. And you get your one out ability to contribute to the group, even if you've been taken down. And like in previous steps, some options will have some weird extra bonus on top of this. In this case, it's in order to counteract a lower than average set of status die. So keep an eye out for that and take that into account when you're making your decisions. Step 5, pick 2 red abilities. Your big, powerful signature moves, your showstoppers that you bust out when all hope seems lost. There's no rolling for these, you just pick. But you are limited in some way. They are in lists by power and quality group, so there's athletic powers group of red abilities and so on. You need to have a power or quality from that group in order to pick that red ability. You can't just pick whatever you want. So if you have an athletic power of super strength or vitality, you can pick one of these. There may be additional requirements within each individual red ability, just keep an eye out for that as well. It's usually you must use this particular power or quality within that group, something like that. Step 6, Revcon. There's a list of specific changes you make to your character, and you pick one. An extra red ability could be really helpful, upgrade a status die, but odds are better you have 2 powers or qualities that need dice swapping. There's other stuff too, of course. It might be your instinct, especially if you're coming say, icons. Oh, I don't need to do this. I can just make my character however I want. I don't need to change things. No, you can change stuff that's outside what you're normally allowed to do. So yeah, still, make a change. Make your character better. Step 7, health. There's an equation for health that includes using your best mental quality or athletic power, but some of you may gain a special thing over the course of character creation. Allows you to replace that with a technology power or anything you want. Keep an eye out for that. Make a note of it. Oh, I don't have to use athletic or mental to contribute to my health. You could be losing out on some precious, precious health points if you're not paying attention. So figure out your max health, and then find your health ranges for status on the chart here, and you'll get your statuses, which will help determine your status dice that you're using at the time. Finally, step 8. Doesn't really count as a step as far as I'm concerned. It's the finishing touches. Fill out height and weight if you want, or whatever, stuff like that. That's it for today. Next time we're talking about how to best approach the constructed method, because randomly rolling a character, as I said, is dumb.